Welcome,
Right.
everyone.
Yeah, welcome. Welcome, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, great. All right, so I'm going to kick us off. My name is Kayla Denoyers. I'm part of the ACMP New England chapter board, and we'd love to welcome you on behalf of ACMP New England to the AI Transformation Summit, a cross-disciplinary panel discussion on driving successful AI transformation. We actually have a fantastic group here today from all different industries, from higher ed, from biotech, from insurance, and so I think it'll be a lively discussion. And we'd love to thank our sponsor as well today, Centric Consulting, for sponsoring our event. Centric Consulting's people and change practice aligns with people, leadership structure, and ways of working to drive adoption, build enterprise change capability, enable a future-ready workforce, and design organizations that deliver business results. So thank you so much for being our chapter sponsor. And we're very excited to have a lively discussion with our panelists today. Thank you for joining us.
Everyone, I'm Bethany Warburton. I'm on the board of ACMP New England and a project manager at Brown University. And for our session goals today, we will we'll be talking through a transformation scenario, AI transformation scenario. Our goal really is just to highlight some of these cross-disciplinary insights where, we have a HR exec, we have a leadership coach, we have a process improvement person, we have a training and development person, and a project manager. These are experts in their field. They are so kind to join us today and lend their insights. And all of them are change managers in one way, shape, or form, right? So we really want to hear more about what they think as we move through the different phases of the AI transformation. Also, we really hope you walk away with some tools, tips, techniques that you can apply in your own work. So I will hand it over back to you. Actually, over to you, Renee.
All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm Renee Murray. I'm the president of ACMP New England. ACMP New England represents 6 states, so we cover all of New England, and our goal is to connect our community of amazing change practitioners. We work to share knowledge across everybody. Additionally, we like to enable people, so we help people to grow their skills and capabilities. And additionally, it gives people opportunity to leave and give back to the community in the change profession. So with that, I will turn it over to the team.
Thank you, Renee. And we'll add our information into the chat as well, so do check that periodically. So we're going to turn over to our wonderful panelists today. We have a great lineup of experts who bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to the discussion. So first, we're going to start with Jackie Langston. Hello, Jackie, and welcome.
Hi,
Jackie
guys.
is Jackie is a certified PMP and agile leader with extensive experience driving business transformation, project portfolio management, and organizational change across both public and private sectors. She has led complex enterprise initiatives for organizations and is known for her collaborative leadership style. Jackie specializes in agile transformation, ERP implementations, process optimization, and building high-performing teams that deliver sustainable business results. Thank you for being with us today. Next, we have Lisa Lanier. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you for being with us, Lisa. Lisa is the founder and CEO of the Lanier Leadership Group and a former C-suite leader with deep experience guiding organizations through growth, restructuring, acquisitions, and large-scale transformation. Now an executive and team coach, she partners with leaders to build capability and translate strategy into sustained behaviors. A PCC certified coach through ICF and ProSci certified change practitioner, Lisa has coached over 500 leaders and is known for helping them find clarity and the aha moments amid complexity and change. Thank you for being with us, Lisa. And then we also have our very own Renee, who we met our chapter president. She is the people and change leader at Centric Consulting with over 20 years of experience guiding complex transformations. She specializes in the human side of AI adoption, helping organizations turn strategy into execution through organizational design, stakeholder alignment, and workforce readiness. Renee advises leaders on embedding AI into daily work to improve decision-making and performance, and is known for connecting strategy to execution while navigating change, risk, and adoption at scale. Thank you for being here, Renee.
All right, I am going to introduce Kristen Newton. She's a change manager at a New England-based energy company. She's got a background in mechanical engineering. Her career evolved from process engineering to Six Sigma and lean manufacturing, and ultimately to change management. She holds a Six Sigma black belt, lean manufacturing credentials, and is a process certified change management practitioner. She focuses on project-based change, organizational transformation, and leadership training. Kristen, so happy you're here. And last but not least, Dr. Miko Nino. He is an educator and learning and development expert with over 20 years of experience. He serves as Assistant Vice President for Adult and Online Education at Rhode Island College and is President of the Association for Talent Development, Rhode Island. He's a published researcher and career development educator. He specializes in leadership, program development, and strategic planning. He was named a 2024 40 Under 40 honoree by the Providence Business News. Thank you, Miko, for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we're going to just talk about some quick ground rules before we dive in. We're going to ask you to keep on mute through the conversation. Please use the Q&A feature. We turned off chat. So as you have questions throughout this discussion, drop them in the Q&A, and we're going to wait until the end and get back to as many as we can. Our panelists have graciously agreed to stay after 3 o'clock if we need it, if we haven't gotten through all the questions. So please know that we will do our best to get through all questions, and we'll be sharing them out after. And yes, and we'll have a live Q&A at the close of the session too. Kayla, over to you.
Thank you. So next we'll review our case scenario. So we'll be talking through a general case scenario today. And just to reiterate, we have a lot of different people from different industries. And so try to think of the commonalities and universal truths along the way and how you can apply it specifically to your industry. So today we'll be looking at Acme National Bank. This bank operates retail banking, commercial lending, and investment services. They're a large-scale domestic enterprise with over 10,000 staff, so it's a large company. The bank wants to shift from basic back-office automation like bill pay to agentic AI and have had some successful AI pilots and are now ready to scale to the enterprise. So there's some important assumptions too to keep in mind that will drive success as well. So we have a solid business case with return of investment metrics in hand, and they are signed off on by leadership. So we have the support of leadership, which is great. It's viewed as a strategic mandate, and it is fully funded for the duration of the project. So that is our scenario. We're also going to post that into the chat, I believe, or you can take a picture if that is helpful.
Great. Thank you, Cindy, for getting that in there. We're going to kick off. We're going to go through the 3 main project phases to really frame our discussion: planning phase, implementation phase, and close. When we do the kind of handoff to the business, and to get us started, we have asked our panelists to really come to this conversation looking at the planning phase, at the implementation phase, at the close phase through the lens of their specific background and training, just so we can really tease out some of the synergies, but also maybe some of the different perspectives that they each bring. So as we think about planning, we know so much of what we do is made or broken here in the planning phase. I'd ask our panelists to just, hey, what are you worried about at planning? What are you thinking about? Who do you really want to make sure is at the table? And I'm going to kick it to you, Lisa, if that's okay, to get us started and really talk through planning for us.
And I think the place I'm starting is with the executive team. Because to your point, they make or break it. So starting with the strength and clarity of their strategy and vision, how they communicate it, and really how the leadership team is aligned around it. Because if they're not aligned, it's a challenge. And I'm thinking about the culture. And so if we dive into those, kind of keeping it to one or two, if we think about the strategy, are they automating or are they augmenting? What are they doing and how are they communicating that? What does that actually mean for the organization? And being upfront and transparent about it. And how do we support the executive team to do that and to ensure that we're aligned on that story we're telling through the organization? And supporting leaders, coaching leaders to translate this for their areas. And I think one of the challenges here is a lot of times it's easier to think about streamlining things than to think about how to use this to create new value. So kind of getting them to think about that. And there's a lot of times what I see with executives is they're afraid. They're afraid to tell truth and to be transparent. So how do we support the executives to be transparent and open and to really talk about that through the organization? And probably the other thing I would really think about is the culture. So is the culture ready for this? Because when you think about this, this requires experimentation. This requires taking risks. There's going to be ambiguity, which people are uncomfortable with. There's going to be learning. There's going to be a learning curve. And if you think about the financial environment, they're more about control, precision, things like that. So how do we support those executives to lead through that? Because they have to be very present. So I wanted to start there, open up to others, but those are probably the two biggest things that I would start to think about.
Yeah. Renee, do you have anything you'd layer into that?
Yeah, actually, I would say, just to build on that, the executives are responsible for the AI strategy, right? They're the ones that make the decisions. They're also ones that build the business case for what is, they take it to the board if there's a board, right? And they present this and the board signs off on it. And usually after the board says, yes, we're aligned, we want to go forward with our strategy, it hits HR. And HR is then tasked with defining what does our people landscape look like, to meet those objectives, right? And so, they have an ROI, and a lot of times we've been hearing in the news that, there's a headcount impact to that. And I think one of the big things is that, there is a need for the organization to really be planful about that headcount impact. And as we can talk further, I think that that's what scares people is where the headcount impact is. And I think that what I'm seeing is that organizations make decisions on headcount before they identify success with the tools. And
1,000%. 1,000%.
That's where we need to focus on, making sure that they see that future appropriately.
Yeah, I feel that. And I think we're seeing a lot of that in the news lately where organizations that came out, kind of blazing like, yeah, we're going to do AI and we're going to be able to reduce our overhead. And then they're realizing, oh, wow, we just invested a lot of money and a lot of time, but we didn't really have a clear idea of what that return looked like, what success looked like. So yeah, it is no joke going into this. And I wonder if we were to compare AI to another change of, let's just say, hey, we're doing an ERP. I mean, the foundational elements are still the same. Like we're implementing a significant change. The emotion though that comes with AI and this like full view of like we have no idea what a year or 2 years is going to look like in this technology. 6 months, we don't know. Just makes the impact that much more scary for the rank and file. And going back to what you were saying, Lisa, the importance that leadership's really articulating a clear vision and roadmap.
Well, to build on that, though, I think what's also different than an ERP is it isn't a project. So it may start
Yeah.
as a project, but AI is changing so fast that there needs to be willingness to shift, to
That's a great
pivot, to do different things, and to realize that this isn't something that's just going to end, that we need to continue to change, we need to evolve, and we need to continue to talk about it. So you've got to have a two-way street. I think what happens when I see a lot of times is executives come up with a vision and they go forth and execute. And I think in this case, we need to be willing to really challenge the executives. They have to stay involved. They have to be present. They have to be part of that learning and that pivoting, and hold them accountable to be there. And it's different from that point of view. And I think maybe one of the ways I would think about it is we want them not to delegate, but we want them to engage and to be very active in that engagement and recognize that we're building something that's going to continue to evolve.
And just to echo 100% agree with that. And I think one of the things that I see is good behavior from executive teams is that they actually understand not just what they've read about what AI can do, but they're using it. They actually have functional capability in tools. I've seen amazing things come out of leaders recently who have taken the time to actually learn how to use it. And people follow leaders who are in line with them, who actually do what they do and help them along in that way, right? And then we have other leaders who don't get engaged and read about what AI can do. And their teams are not the ones that I've seen be super successful because of that, go and proliferate my teaching or my statements versus, what I do.
Right.
So
Well,
I think,
and to build on that is the discomfort of I don't know this, I don't understand it as an executive.
Right.
yeah,
And one of the coolest things I've seen organizations doing, and Renee, I know you have, is the reverse mentoring. So it's the
yes,
willingness to go and
yes,
ask people, younger people, a lot of times is the
yeah,
way the executives phrase it, but teach me how to do this. And you create
Mm.
so much opportunity and connection with that. It's such a great tool to use.
100%.
And not only, so if I could just jump in here too, it's not
Thanks.
only just asking with the reverse mentoring, asking folks for help on how to use the tool and all the different uses for it, but also asking them like, how am I coming across with this change? Because we can't forget that it's, at the executive level, absolutely, we need buy-in, but we need everybody in the company to really be behind this change and be participative in the change. They need to be brought along in all phases of the journey. They need their opinion really matters. Their fear really matters. How do we
Mm.
alleviate that fear? Are they going to lose their job? What does it look like? We need to be really mindful of our staff too at this point. I mean, with the lean manufacturing that I have in my background, that really started, way back when, but one of the facets of lean is respecting your people and also making everybody problem solvers. So we need to remember that that happens when we're going through a change. We need to engage with people, ask them their opinions, ask them how they would do it, try to build from all of that as well.
Yeah, I'd like to add, when you really think about how you take ownership, the difference between these AI transformations and other transformations in the past is when you think of the software development lifecycle, people are brought in to get their requirements, their needs, right? They're brought back to test and validate that we've sufficed the needs. This is an entirely different journey in the sense it goes back to where Kristen is, which is what is the collective problem we're solving, right? AI makes us all solutioners. And I think if you can start in the planning phase with changing the culture to focus on you're part of crafting the solution to the problem, it changes the way people think.
Yeah, and that leads into op model changes too, right? So again, coming back from an HR lens is we're changing the way people think, we're changing the way that they work, they're participating. And so it really is your op model prepared to absorb and shift in real time with this changing world, right? And looking at job descriptions, roles and responsibilities, right? And this has to be a very repetitive, easy, agile process because to your point earlier, Lisa, it's happening so quickly and every day something is changing. So you can't plan for the
Right.
future like you could in the past. So you have to really think about how do we adjust every second, and it feels like every second right now. But how do we adjust,
Right.
and pivot extremely fast?
But I think that plays into the culture as I'm listening to you,
Yeah.
because cultures that tend to be, this is the way we do things, which in this case study,
Yes.
we see a lot in there. Now they're shifting, which means I may not hear things that are consistent from day to day. And then people get very frustrated and they start to think very negatively about it, as opposed to, ooh, this is part of what's going on. Things are constantly changing and our executives are pivoting, which is what we want them to do. So it's kind of how we set our own teams up for that to go through this.
Yes, exactly. And culture makes or breaks every transformation, right?
And we need to remember that culture change takes a long time and it continues, right? It always continues. So it takes a lot of patience for folks.
Yes. And we don't usually have that when it comes to AI transformation, right? It's, you know, starting at the top, right? The executive makes the strategic decision. They align the vision. They say, we're going to do this. They expect an ROI on a business case and they anticipate, which I'm seeing a lot. We're going to get, 40 to 60% more efficient in, a set determined time without being extremely planful and understanding that humans are not AI, but they have
Yeah.
to validate everything that comes out of AI, right? So 100% agree.
The other thing that you guys made me think of, and I know we only have 2 minutes left for the planning phase, and we could do a whole session just on planning, but when you have executives that are maybe getting squeezed by the board, like, hey, this AI thing, we're going to save some money, we're going to return more to our shareholders, like, I think we're seeing that non-planful movement, and ultimately that costing more and the impact. So I mean, we can all only raise and upward mentor, but I think we really need to rely on our leaders um, to not just hit the gas without really thinking through the impacts. There's some reports that are saying in some deployments, AI is making people work more than before because they're having to do all the cleanup around the implementation. So,
Well, I think to build on that, just in terms of the executives, it's a lot of the coaching that I'm doing is around how do you communicate this? Something that you don't know for sure. There's a lack of comfort in terms of I don't know this area. I have to confront something that's going to make people uncomfortable. So there's a lot of how do you create that, challenge them, but also create that comfort that this is what you need to do to lead.
Well, and also
And to do it
about scope.
authentically.
Oh, sorry,
Yes,
Renee.
1000%. Yes.
I
Sorry,
was going to
Kristen.
say it's also about scoping, right? Like, what is this? What is our initial scope and what isn't it? What are we not going to focus on right now? And
Yeah.
just continuing to, obviously, there's going to be, the scope will change as we continue to move forward, and that just needs to be really well communicated to everybody.
Absolutely.
let's hand it over to Kayla to dive us into implementation.
Thank you. So now that we're past our planning phase, we're going to look at implementation and how that would take us to the next place. So from your lens or your background and training, what are one or two important things that you think about when you think about implementation? Maybe who and what you're most worried about, and what kind of risks or concerns you would like to monitor. So maybe we could start with Jackie and then Kristen and Dr. Nino.
So just kind of circling back on, when is training important in this new kind of landscape? And the way you have to think about it is what is that throughput of success that you want from the very beginning, because inherently AI, you can say, okay, we're going to use agile methodologies so that people are in kind of a cycle of um, improvement. But in reality, I would say from a training perspective, really focusing early on, even in the very beginnings with the data models and making sure data is cleansed and making sure that people understand the data that is coming, that you think about it from a community of practice perspective. Because if you start in the very beginning of figuring out who are your change champions in this community of practice, even at the modeling phase, when you get to these adaptive cycles, they're there for you and they're going to understand how this kind of new behavior pattern behaves.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jackie. And I think when you talk about training, oftentimes we see it towards the end of the project, right before implementation. But I think it's really important that users get into whatever the new product will be at all the different phases, right from the beginning, even like just hearing from them for, in this example, for instance, AI. How do you use AI, users? How can we get other people to sort of feel comfortable using AI in that way? You use it to create a document. Okay, that's the beginning stage, but what do other folks do? And how can we learn from each other and bring people along the way so that it becomes less, again, I used the word fear before, but so it becomes less fearful, getting people in and seeing what's happening and using it and getting feedback from folks is super important, you know, at all phases, not just at the end when we focus on training kind of stereotypically.
There are 5 things that I do every time I implement a project and I follow the same order. So the first one is like when you come to me telling me you have to implement this, I need to have a conversation with the person requesting for 2 things. You have to define success for me. What are your key performance indicators? When we're talking about AI, we have to move from the satisfaction or the number of adopters into something deeper like cost reduction, numbers of tickets that are sold, revenue, sales. So you have to define for me what success is going to look not only in 1 year, but 5 or even 10 years. So you have to define for me in that conversation what success looks like. And the second thing, I, in a way, create these informal contracts. Who is going to be responsible for what? What roles are going to be supported along the way? So that conversation needs to happen. That's my first step. Number 2, I create a culture of systems. There are 2 systems that I build. You cannot just focus on the training first and then after that you do implementation. I have to have multiple parts working at the same time. That way you can always show progress in different areas. So yes, you have to train the people who are going to be developing the models, but you also have to have people doing the research to see what's out there. You have to have somebody testing at all times. So you have to have multiple systems working at once. And another thing that I do is you have to be creating prototypes and refining. Don't wait till the very end. Every single step, test it. Even if it's like a small scale, have some evidence if it's going to work or not. So that's my second step. Number 3, I check progress. Sometimes you need to replace the team. Sometimes you have to move parts around. Sometimes you have to admit this is not looking the way we were promised at the beginning or we thought of. People are embarrassed of admitting that, but that's very important. Don't wait till the end. So have, even if it's an Excel, check on progress. That will really save you some nightmares at the end. Number 4, I check the budget. Sometimes we run out of budget because we're not paying attention to the budget, and then it's too late, and then we have to find whatever is cheap to finish the project. And last but not least, you always have to be conducting research because things are changing real quick. So as all these systems are working, as I'm implementing, I have one person devoted to always be looking what, in my case, other nonprofits or other schools are doing, what tools are out there, because things are changing faster than ever. And when you start seeing what the competition or what other industries are bringing, you can, because you have this agile mentality, you can start fixing and improving along the way, not waiting till the very end to realize, oh, now X, Y, and Z are doing this.
And I have a quick question for you guys, since you're, talking about training, and I agree that we don't want it to be at the end. I think that, it's super important and it goes in the lifestyle. But, what I've been seeing lately is that there's post-training, people get proficient with using AI in their role and they hit a limit. They're like, oh, I can use it. It's helping me do my work, but now I'm done learning. Right. And I don't know if you have seen that with AI is, oh, I know how to use Copilot. Right. I know how to use the basics. I can search, I can ask questions. But are you seeing that? And what have you done to, overcome that if you've seen it?
The research component for me, when they do the research and you present the research, people realize real quick that there's something new to learn. So that's another value of that research.
Go
Yeah,
ahead, Jackie.
I could tell you that I think it comes back to that communication plan from the executive leadership, which is what is that problem we're solving? It's wonderful that people are staying, or you're changing the culture for people to be aware of the new and then to implement and put aspects of AI in their day to day. But if you think about it, this feedback loop and like what you're talking about, Dr. Miko, like, giving people this constant feedback back, it's got to be shared at a much higher level, the successes as well as not just feedback.
So I think to build, Jackie, and what you're saying, I think it's not only the executive team, but how you prep all the leaders all the way through the organization to have this conversation, to create the consistency. And they're going to be going through their own feelings and discomfort as they go through this. So how do they lead through all of this change? If they're going to be letting people go, like you were talking about, Renee, then how do we help them lead through that? Because a lot of the leaders that I work with, they're so uncomfortable. They don't know how to respond, how to show up, and how to talk. So I think to go through all of that, how are they prepared to lead through this?
Yeah, to add to that, I think in learning and development, we talk a lot about prototyping, agile mentalities, but we should embrace it in a way that when you discover that something is not working, fixing it should not be seen as a failure. I think that sometimes we don't have that culture of normalizing fixing something because it's not what we thought, and that sense of embarrassment it's counterproductive, it's detrimental. I think if we embrace a culture in which we're doing this to get better at, that can solve many problems.
I think along those lines of cascading communications and embracing your failures and making them learning opportunities,
Mhm.
right? I think middle managers are the folks that I like to focus on a lot when it comes to this kind of transformation, because middle managers are the folks who they support failures to get better, right? They're the people who are with the team members directly. And there's so much on those folks' plates anyway. We always talk about middle managers have historically and continue to have such a heavy burden, right? But they are the ones that we rely on to meet the objectives of the executive team and the board, right? And so if they see people failing, if they're supporting them through all these different training opportunities and helping them to grow and develop and not hit the plateau, that's where I see so many people, I just like to help the middle managers to achieve their goals, right?
We're
think
getting close to wrapping up implementation. Kayla, did you have any other?
I was just going to say, I think this is really the phase where you see a lot of the connections happen between these different offices and disciplines, communications, creating a culture of learning, coaching with training. So I think it's really great to kind of see that come together from hearing from all of you.
Can I mention one other thing?
Mhm.
And that is something that maybe is underrated, but like road shows. Just keeping
Mhm.
this top of mind for people, having, when people walk into a building, having a desk there with a laptop that people, when they come in, ask them, would you like to see this? Would you like to actually sit down and do it? Like just getting people involved. And Renee, when you mentioned the plateau, like again, newsletters or whatever the communication channel is within your company, continually talk to folks, interview folks, and find out how are you using AI? How has it helped you? The what's in it for me, we need to remember too, and reminding people that change you know, we live through change every day. Yesterday is not like today. That is who we are. So resisting change is, you know, always an interesting concept to me. But trying to, you know, just the road shows and learning from each other constantly, I think will get people also to buy in.
One more piece about that, because I 100% agree with you, Kristen, is the fact that AI projects, because of the fact that it's a data pipeline, it is by nature incredibly cross-functional. So when you talk about roadshows, partnering departments, showing the partnership, showing the collaboration leads to that connectivity.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's great.
I wanted to say too, there was I'm just looking at a Deloitte report that said metrics should shift from how many employees have a license to how deeply the technology is embedded into value generating workflows. And I think each of you have spoken to that. You know, Dr. Nino, you out of the gate saying like, what are those success metrics, right? And as we start to think about, okay, we're it's getting through implementation, we're approaching closing this implementation, this transformation. I think it was even Renee or Lisa, one of you saying from the planning phase, we don't really close AI, right? Like, you know, this is ongoing. What are you thinking about it as, you know, we're going from implementation to what's next? Who wants to put their toes in the water on close, aka moving it to, you know, business as usual and continuous improvement and sinking it into the culture?
Well, I can start, and I will say with that that the biggest mistake is to have an early victory celebration. Sometimes when you gather some evidence at the beginning, you have a novelty factor is going to work. But one of the things that should always happen, not only for this, but with any initiative, is transfer of knowledge. 6 months, 1 year, 5 years. If you really want to see the impact that you have long term, you have to do transfer of knowledge evaluations. 6 months, 1 year, 5 years. That's usually sometimes people at three, but it's very hard. Sometimes it's close to impossible, but at least you need to strive to have the 1 year to have evidence of what needs to happen there. And the other thing is that you need to have a succession plan, because once things are done and delivered, people start moving departments and things around. What's going to happen with this project once you have some changes in your company? So you need to find mechanisms to protect all the progress that you have made. And that succession planning of what if in the event of certain changes is going to happen with this initiative to keep it going.
Yeah, it sort of speaks to just organizational resiliency, right? You don't want one or two SMEs that, you know, call Lisa, she knows. You really do hope that fluency of the tool is embedded.
So
Yeah, who wants?
I
Go
would
ahead.
challenge that maybe one of the metrics of success isn't the traditional ones that we've completed the project, but that we've actually created the capability to evolve and do more change. And so as we look ahead, have we
100%.
built in that capability through this? Because so often, again, we think about it as here's the beginning, here's what it looks like, here's the end. And instead to start to say, okay, we focused on this, we've built this with our leaders at all levels, going like Renee with what you were saying, so we can continue to evolve and change because that's what we need with AI.
Yeah. And I would also say that, you know, it's, did we get, were we, before we say business as usual, did we achieve what we intended? Right? Did we actually reach the goal? Because I know that there are a lot of business cases out there for this strategic alignment around AI transformation, but 11%, I think, of companies have actually implemented AI workflows. And so, as we look across, if you've achieved it, that's wonderful. But is your op model, are you actually structured in a way to get the best out of it? Right? Is your team prepared to move forward and work differently? I think those are all questions that I ultimately leave with is, are you really done? Because there is no done, right? But are you
Yeah.
structured? Do you have the capability to continue moving forward successfully?
What
And
is
to
your
continue
business as
proving
usual
value.
model?
Also, yeah, also, if you think about it, the only real change people care about is the change in their pockets. And I think the change that really matters is the change in your face. And I think when you talk about what's in it for me, that really is one of the success factors. I need to be able to see as an employee the benefit for me from before the project starts till afterwards and to know where I'm going. And that is the change management. That's the transformation for me and for everyone else in the org.
I agree. And you have
So
to be
you're
creative trying to prove value. Sometimes you prove value at the beginning. Everybody's excited if you prove value by adoption. But one year, the story of adopters is not going to be interesting enough. So what other metric, what other evidence you can gather to keep proving value on an annual basis to your company? Because failure to prove that value, and that has to change, is one of the biggest issues when you're trying to have long-scale implementations or continue projects in the future.
I also, from my past, making things super fun also helps. You know, if you can create immersive experiences, things that people, I've created AI video games to get people interested in the change.
Yeah. So I've created agents and shown my team members how to use the agents and get some really cool data out of the agents. And then also, how do you build agents? Because they just want to be able to do that, right? And once you show people, they're super excited to continue. But it is, I think, from the top to the employee level, it is a full restructuring of how you work. It is the ways of working shift. Overarching, the ways you work shift from the board, the executive team, all the way through every piece of the STLC, the life cycle of work. So it's an interesting experience.
I wonder if anyone. Go ahead, Bethany.
I was just going to say I think one of the challenges too that each of you alluded to is, governance, right? Like, how do you make sure folks that are building agents have the right security reviews? That there's those pieces in place to protect data, to protect employees, but also like, are you creating a bunch of agents and no one's really going back to look at utilization and effectiveness, and how are you going to measure that and make sure you have some ongoing governance? I think that's such a challenge in this fast moving technology, because the shiny thing today isn't going to be the shiny thing in a few months. But did we create an albatross a few months ago that's going to even poke some holes in our security, and no one's going back to look at it because we're so enamored with the new thing?
I'm hoping that strategic vision that was set by the executive team at the beginning, that business case came with governance. Because if it didn't, I think you're absolutely right. You've created an albatross, and then now change managers, project managers, process improvement, training. I mean, we're all involved in fixing the challenges that were created by the implementation, the transformation.
Yeah, I mean, kind of oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Nope, you.
No, I was going to say it's kind of doubling back to the planning phase of when you implement an AI project. What's different about it when you think of your different work streams, by nature, your data and tech strategy is a cornerstone of the of the entire project. So when you think about security and who's going to have access to data, who is going to actually be looking at the models, a lot of the things that Dr. Miko was talking about, these are things that need to be decided. Like there's decisions on who sits in what level of the framework at the planning phase. And I think that goes back to even kind of that earlier kind of conversation we were talking about. Okay, who are we empowering as part of this process? Because your role potentially is going to change. Mm-hmm. Whether that's security or people within the different departments.
100% agree. Role changes, role shifts, that happens. And people leaders, in HR need to be prepared for that. They need to plan for that. And if you do that at the outset, like we all talked about, right? If you do it at the beginning, It's going to save you a lot of grief at the end. If there is an end, like I said, there is no end. It's going to save you some grief.
Yeah, another Deloitte article or report said, I have some stuff loaded up in my notebook LM, but it says that essentially an HR for agents should be created, so that, it's really looking at monitoring the performance of the agents and utilization, and then have a retirement plan for these digital workers, for these agents, as they would for human employees, which I think, gosh, it's a really interesting way to look at it. We just have a couple of minutes here. Last thoughts from anyone before we open the floor to some questions?
Just to kind of dovetail on what you just talked about, it is a change to the way we work as organizations. We've very rapidly have moved from hierarchical department structures to more matrix organizations, and that's the part when you think about these kind of teams, these kind of like tiger teams who do certain functions within orgs. Now you have the scenarios where one of your quote unquote tiger team members possibly is an AI agent. So if you think about it, just the team dynamics are part of a shift.
And I would say that we know in project management that we cannot be linear, but we tend to be linear. So when we're implementing, you need to have these multiple systems working at the time, refining. You cannot just wait till the very end. Waiting too late is one of the biggest reasons for failure in my own experience. So yeah, not linear, always
100%.
agile. So yeah.
100%.
Mhm.
I would say, just to close out, I think we start back where we started at the beginning with what Lisa was saying, right? Is that this is an organization shift, right? It's a model shift. It is a new tool, but it's new ways of working. You're successful when AI just becomes part of the norm. Most of us have used Google or Word, Microsoft or whatever your tool is at work. When you first start using it, it's a little crazy. You get scared, you go through the change curve, but ultimately success is, everybody has a clear understanding of what that strategic vision and intent was. And the organization has started to normalize the use of things, and the panic and fear has subsided, right?
Yeah. Any other final thoughts from folks?
I think the one thing I would throw out there is, I think, to build on what Renee was saying, is we need to be probably more willing than ever to challenge senior leaders and to really push on them in a way to get the engagement, get the involvement, and to ensure that they are leading in a way that they need. I think sometimes we hesitate to challenge them as much as they need to be challenged. And I think it's really important that we're willing to do that and to really set expectations about maybe what the consequences are if they're not leading there from the front end. Like I said, being really, really engaged and not delegating.
Yeah, and Lisa, I agree with you. Our senior leaders are executive sponsors for many of the programs and changes that happen at our companies. And what I see at my company is that there's just too many projects for each executive to be that champion. So I think to circle back also to the beginning is making sure those middle managers, the your staff, the folks that are actually doing the job. I work for an electrical company, the people that are up on poles, down in holes, that they also are part of the process.
Great. All right.
Excellent. Any other thoughts? Any other key takeaways that you want to share for the audience before we move on to Q&A? Well, on behalf of ACMP New England, we'd love to thank our panelists for sharing their expertise and experience Your insights are invaluable. So it was such a pleasure to have you here and listen to all of your thoughts and perspectives on how to implement change transformation in AI. We will open up. We have about 10 minutes or so for questions, but before we do that, I'm just going to give a quick wrap up link in the chat if we could share. If you'd like to join ACMP New England, we would love to have you. The ACMP Global site has tons of great resources on change management like this, on AI and different topics. And if you're interested in sponsorship, you're welcome to contact us as well, or know anyone else. We would love to hear from you. So we have other AI events coming, so stay tuned, some more specific, and we'd love to hear from some suggestions from you if you have any that you'd like to see events like this. So we will open up the Q&A now. We have any questions in our Q&A.
Yeah, Deborah had a question. She said, I thought Jackie was referring to training as in training the model, the LLM, not user training. Please clarify. Jackie, way back when we were talking through the importance of training, and this is a great distinction, and something just a few years ago we wouldn't have to think the distinction. Were you thinking of training as in training the model or training the humans, or both?
Well, if you think about it, and hey, Deb, nice to see you, a fellow change management project manager from my Connecticut chapter of PMI versus I'm in Rhode Island. So shout out to Deb. It's both. And that's what I love about this is that your user training, which I think we were saying a lot of times happens at the very end. This is an opportunity at the time of the data model to actually have people having like, what does our training content look like? Is our training content a wiki? How does our like the actual content itself, right? When you think of historically the concepts of policies and SOPs and work instructions, that
Hello.
changes with
I'm here to
AI.
pick up Mia Campbell from Mr. Abbasi's class. How are you?
I think, Mike, we need you. There we go. Okay, we got him muted.
But does that make sense? I think it happens at the same time, and the methodology and the content provided is what changes in this landscape.
Yeah, as you were talking too, it goes back to that. As we're training a model, as we're training like a LLM, that as Miko said, it's ongoing. Like, it isn't linear and we just do it and we're alive now. I mean, that has to be baked into what we were talking about before, like the governance. How do we have ongoing training and testing of our model? Any tips on that? Any thoughts you guys may have?
Well, I will tell you, this is a perfect use case for an AI agent for your training.
Yeah. We Bill had a couple of questions. What are some approaches that sound logical, sensible, but have proven to be ineffective in managing AI-related change? It's a great question.
I would say having the wrong people on the team. And I know that sometimes you have to appoint people on the team based on seniority or titles. But when it comes to this kind of initiative, you have to bring the best possible team together. And not everybody is qualified, regardless of title, to be leading innovative initiatives, because one of the key things to have success is to be able to take a risk and to be able to be refining along the way. And if you have a team of people who are playing more the politics into this or trying to comply with budget, that can be really problematic. So I will say sometimes it's logical to have a certain team of people based on certain characteristics, but you have to push and really think who are the people really qualified to lead and make sure this actually happens.
I 100% agree with that. I think that to your point, I think that people who are in roles of manager, director, VP, etc., some of them are not suited to lead this transformational change. They're just not,
Yeah.
right? And I think that, I'm going to defer to Lisa on coaching some of those folks, along the way to lead this particular change. But I find that, people who are not technical leaders, they need to get a little more technical, right? And because they have to lean in on the AI capability to be successful. And so, I have a lot of people that I work with who, they admit they're not techies, right? They don't like technology. But I think we're past that at this point. So how can we help those folks get to where they need to be successful? And that is, comes back to support through coaching and training and guidance. But it's a very good point. It's not going to be successful without the right leaders in place.
I would say another mistake is thinking that the more money you invest and the millions and millions are going to take you far. I mean, of course, money is necessary to do this, but you need to be somebody who is strategic about allocating that money, because you can quickly run out of the money. Halfway there, you don't have more resources, and then you have to find a last minute solution that is not going to take you where the original vision was. So you have to be somebody in the team who is really strategic about allocating the funds that you get for the initiative.
One of the things, though, that I see happening is disparity of AI toolset in organizations, which means that some people have high access to elaborate AI tools and other people have the basics, what comes free, right? And if you want your organization to be able to grow successfully, I think there has to be some calibration there, or you have to give people opportunities to shine with those higher end tools in some fashion. It's very expensive, right? AI is not cheap. So I do see that as being a key component, though. Understand where your money needs to go to be successful, but spend it wisely.
Well, and I think to build on that, it's that willingness from the leaders to evolve the KPIs that we set or what the success metrics are, because you enter a project, a lot of times we enter, this is what we're going to do, this is what success looks like, here's what we're going for. But there also has to be a willingness along the way as things evolve to change those. And sometimes I see a lack of willingness to do that, and with how quickly everything is evolving. And I think to your point, Renee, it could be on the tools. We're going to change access. It's going to impact our budget, but we need to make that decision because it's the right thing to do.
I wanted to just kind of softball something to Kristen. The BCG report talked about, and Bill, this is kind of getting at what you're saying, your question is. It says, rather than just paving the cow path by automating existing manual steps, leaders have to commit to clean sheet redesigns of end-to-end workflows. How much of a lift is that? And that's got to be in planning too, right?
Yeah, and it is a big lift. But it doesn't make sense to automate something that has waste in it. I mean, when you think about what lean is reducing waste. And if you're automating a function that has waste either preceding it or after it because of what you're automating, that just doesn't make sense. But we've been doing that for years. I mean, bots have been developed for years because folks don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the resources, they don't have the money behind doing the whole, process redesign. So people have convinced themselves that it does make sense, and it's really all based on dollars and cents.
Mm-hmm. I hadn't heard that phrase, paving the cow path, before, but I really like that.
I think that if you are in the privileged position of assembling the team, you have to be smart enough of who are the people willing to implement these new initiatives and challenge the status quo. Sometimes you need to have in the team people willing to do that. If you have certain people blocking, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I can tell you it really, what's unique about these type of initiatives is, you're not implementing a new AP system, right? This is trying to utilize technology in a way to solve a people, process, and systems problem at scale, cross departments. And I think the problem statement is really the key. And, the business analyst in me, it really does come down to having everybody hold their hands and really look at that data model and what that flow is and that commitment.
Just to add a little to that, sometimes the culture of the company is not to do a company-wide initiative. And if your department is the one leading that, you're better off doing a pilot. Build some success stories with something small, and then you start getting the buy-in. Because if you don't have the buy-in, it's really hard to go company-wide. Mm-hmm. So start small, build some success, have something to prove and show, and that will be your best ally to be able to take these larger.
Bill had another question here. Where do you see organizations falling on the spectrum of providing robust AI tools for their employees to use versus being limited due to IT security concerns? I think that's a big one. I know at Brown, we're struggling with that.
I would say that it depends on your industry. It depends on your regulations. It depends on the size of your organization, right? There are so many different things, but if your industry if you're a small company, you probably don't have the resources to have a strong security team, at your beck and call, right? And so that becomes a limiter of what you should and shouldn't implement without fear. And I think that security is the most important thing with AI, because whatever you put into AI is training the LLM. It's training and it's becoming public. And so if your organization, I'm just going to go back to our Acme Bank example, right? If your organization is a bank, you have high regulation and you have significant risk. And so you have to manage the security components before you can possibly even allow your teams to use AI, right? It's just a lot of companies have determined right now that they aren't able to implement full-scale AI without having their own instance on their systems. Because if you don't have your own workspace, Copilot is an example, you are training the LLM. And then your private, company data is out there. So you have to be really conscientious about that.
Yeah, I think the other piece too, as you were talking, Renee, I was thinking about like that kind of shadow IT, right? Little pockets, or maybe using Claude, or maybe we're using, Gemini, even though as an organization we've said we're Copilot or whatever it is. Like, I think that's a significant risk for organizations because people don't know what they don't know about what's going back out to the LLM.
Also, IT department. Sorry, go ahead, Renee. Sorry.
No. Go ahead, Nico.
No, I was just gonna say that IT departments should also reconsider their culture and policies. I'm all about security, but sometimes they tend to be way too conservative. So I think this will make them revisit some policies and be strict when they have to necessarily.
I think the policies, a lot of companies I've worked with have good policies in place, but they still don't have limiters on employees' capability to go to their own personal AI tools on the web, right? So if you pay for, I'm just going to give an example of Perplexity, you have to trust that your employee through policy is not putting, company confidential information in Perplexity that lives on their personal account, right? And I'm sure that companies have the capabilities to monitor this, but I still think of that as a pretty significant risk, right? And I don't know too many people who haven't asked Claude on the side something, on their cell phone that's not managed by their company policies. Hopefully they didn't put actual company, PII or whatnot into the system. But you can see people doing that. And I've heard of people doing that. And, you know, people just have to be honest, and you have to hire the right people to go through this AI transformation with you, right? Hopefully the companies that we work with are hiring the right people and they are complying with policy. They're rule followers, if you will, because I think in this day and age, it's super important to protect your confidential corporate information. And for me in consulting, I certainly wouldn't want to put at risk my clients' information, right? But I do think it's a significant risk for companies right now.
Well, I think to build on that, there's also how we handle it when people they do something wrong. Right. Because it can be this big blow up and, oh my gosh, did you hear that, you know, Joe did this and this happened and oh my gosh, and blah, 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 as opposed to this happened and here's what we learned and here's how we need to act going forward. I mean, you can take it from both sides, and how we react to that, I think, is so key.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tighten down the policies, support the teams to understand how they can use it better.
Talk about the why we can't do this. Yeah.
And improve our training, right? I think improve the training capabilities so people are able to, you know, watch the training and actually understand what the policies tell them to do.
Yeah. And why.
Yep.
Yeah.
We had a question from Rick Wells. When you mentioned the transition of production phase or business as usual, what approach would you recommend to successfully get the users to adopt the new way of working with the AI tool?
So what approach would you to successfully get the users to adopt? I think it depends on the company, right? It depends on the circumstances. I don't think that there's one approach fits all, but I would say that you have to have the right owners for the ongoing future. You have to make sure that, you know, if perhaps if you have a consulting team, I'm just going to use the consulting team example, right? Consultants come in, they support you through the actual transformation, and then when it's transitioned, did you put the right people in place to own it and carry it forward? And because it's never going to end, you really need to make sure that you partner with those folks along the way, and they are learning through working with you so that when you leave, they have the ability to carry it on. I see so many times consultants leave, and we typically leave before the reinforcement phase of change management, right? We are there until we do implementation, and then it's like, okay, budget's gone, but then it's the ongoing component that we don't get to see all the time. So we have to make sure that you have transition plans in place that start at the beginning.
And to your point, after it's implemented, they have the reinforcements, let's do it, let's talk about it, and the positive reinforcement as opposed to the you must do this. And so often I see the negative impact of that. And I think if people are told they have to do this, it's so different than if they understand why they need to do it and what the benefits are. So it all comes back to the communication.
And along those lines, I was going to say that you need to preach with the example. Sometimes you need to use it yourself first. The people leading the vision, find a way in which you can implement these changes and show what happened when you had those changes. That brings a trust to the table, but also you have a tangible example of the benefit of using the new technologies or whatever outputs you had.
And they trust their colleagues more than they trust the leaders.
Yeah, absolutely.
Most often. Yeah.
You always have to be.
I'm sorry?
No, I was just saying you always have to be purpose driven. Why am I doing this? Why did I spend 5 minutes? You have to understand your purpose.
And you have to have the right change management or the right change, team to support you through this. Because if you don't have the right change champions, you don't have the right leaders, they won't be able to move forward. They won't continue.
Kristen, you were gonna.
I was going to say, and if this is a top priority for your company, I mean, sometimes there does have to be sort of that stick involved, Lisa. I tend to disagree a little bit. And putting this into folks, annual goals and trying to find a way to measure the adoption. I don't know offhand really what kind of measures we could use for adoption. That's maybe another question, but I think that would be important also to find a way to measure it and to ask people to put it into their goals.
Well, and I agree with you in the sense that at a certain point you just have to make decisions, right? If people aren't going to come along and be part of it, I mean, yes, you can coach people, but only so far.
Yep, true.
Yeah.
But I think there has to be more. I see a lot of organizations saying, go forth and prosper, use AI and become more efficient. And it's just this, it's just this random statement that the
Yes.
executive team throws out there. And, it's left to everybody to figure out what that actually means and how to do that, right? And I think that there is a level of positive, that can come with that. It's a free for all, but there's a lot of concern with that. And there's a lot of, I think, again, middle management who are trying to figure it out so that they can say we've achieved that random kind of vague statement of become more efficient and use AI, right? So it starts with
Right.
Starts at the top.
Right, exactly. It starts at the top.
Yeah. I liked what Kristen had said earlier too about the road show, right? Like let's really show some examples of how people at the desktop are using it and in that peer one of you had alluded to that also. Like let's see peers using it and not just someone from training and development, walking us through it. Valerie had a question related to communication. There's so much changing. We're finding that communication is becoming even more challenging and noisy, right? Like we're all cutting through the AI generated comms too. Any recommendation on solutions for how to keep executives, et cetera, stakeholders informed about the work in progress?
Executives need to hold them accountable. I mean, full stop. And I think a lot of times that accountability is not part of the culture. It's not that strong. So they have to set expectations and they need to hold those leaders accountable for leading through it, communicating it consistently. Because what I've seen with a lot of organizations, even if your team comes in and creates that, people don't do it. And so they need to really, and then I think we need to listen, right? If it's working or not.
I also think communicating on a regular basis with your executive team, right? I mean, I think that executive leaders, for them to be kept in the know and the progress, I like weekly status reports. I know that is not something that a lot of people appreciate. But if a leader is engaged, which we've said that the leaders have to be engaged, they have to hold the team accountable. The only way they're going to know is if it is something they actually look at on a weekly basis, right?
So they need to be held accountable to do it. The executives
Exactly.
do. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So the more frequently you have that visibility with the executive team, the more, they'll see your progress and they'll be with you. They'll join you on it.
I think there needs to also be a drive to simplify our communications. Like the status reports that I sometimes see are so crazy complicated, not complicated, but there's just a lot of words on one page. And I think we need to just simplify it so people are seeing it and they're able to understand it.
100%, Kristen. I've just recently been working with some project managers where, we have paragraphs for work streams of descriptions of, and I just, and I love my team, so I shouldn't, but it's just, we've got to resolve this and get back to this simple. What does the executive team need to know?
Right.
And, let's get them to the right level.
Yep. And communicate it in many different ways, many different times. Right? So just get it out there and whatever, whether it's email, whether it's through Teams channels, whatever you have within your company, get it out as many. in the offices, like put them in the cafeterias. I don't know, have TV screens. Yeah, like it is, however you can do it, because everyone receives communications differently. We know that. So yeah.
And just to go back on accountability for a second, it can be super simple. Like I remember one time I ran into the CEO that I was working on a project, and I said, "Oh, did you have any questions on the report we issued, 2 days ago?" Completely blank look. So let me tell you, he went back, he looked at the report, I got a question, and I checked in with him a couple times on that over the next month, and he read that report, and I got him engaged. So it's very simple. It doesn't need to be a big deal, but it was just, hey, I was curious. So just some things to throw out there.
I love that approach. I love that approach.
Yeah, yeah. It's innocent.
We had a question from Bhupender. I believe I'm saying your name correctly. Apologies if I'm not. We had a question related to localized LLM adoption in small and medium enterprises. Ultimately, I think this just goes back to adoption, right? Because it is agnostic to the tool itself. You're talking a little bit about a specific tool in your question, but um, I think one of the things we heard from our professor, from our coach, from our HR exec, from our PM, from our Lean Six Sigma Black Belt is, change ultimately is about the people. And what are we doing to make sure people are communicated with, are led, are enabled, feel safe? I heard that theme across all of what we've talked about. But I don't know, did anyone have anything else they wanted to maybe add to that specific to Bhupender's question?
I just questioned real quick. So I was looking at the question and if AI has autonomous control at every step, I'm concerned. I'm concerned. I think that we talked a bit about the human in the loop component, and I think that I would like to see the human in the loop be part of that conversation because we have seen some things in the news recently where
Right, true.
there has been, AI has decided to make bad decisions and it has caused significant grief for corporations because they have not necessarily had the appropriate oversight. And even though you set policy, the LLM went around the policy and said, yes, I discarded that policy. I made my own decision to discard that policy and do what I wanted to do. And I won't quote those companies because I think that they had some pretty significant impacts in the travel industry just recently. So,
Am I allowed to say one part here? Sorry, just I thought like this is the point. I'm Bhupender, by the way. I wrote that question. So you said that it is very critical and very important to know that how we can really look into a case study that human in the loop is not bypassed. So I actually work with a SAP consulting company, and we are trying to become their partner, and we are experimenting on their tool, trying to understand what challenges it may pose and whether it is an effective tool or not. So far in my understanding, what I felt and realized and saw that it is tuned to ask questions and it pauses for your input. So they are not using public LLMs. Maybe they have, but they're like tuning their own language models on chatbot engine on 50 years of data, and it knows all the workflows, everything, and it will ask you, okay, this is the report. Are you fine? Should I proceed with next? Should I post the invoice? Should I ask the team member to submit an update? So that is the ethical use I saw, but I'm
yep,
concerned, like you are, that where is the boundary line?
yeah,
Where is exactly the boundary line? That because the moment you open up your internal language model to the outside the commercial models, which are very like hallucinating,
yeah, yeah.
always taking things. So that is a very big concern, which I feel. So I want to know how Project Management Institute is shaping up that AI project management policies? Because myself, I'm practicing project management for the last 20 years, but in a way, now I see when we see ERP projects and when we say that they have their own model, they have their own like system to manage the projects, and everywhere AI is imbibed.
Yep, very true.
So I don't know, like I'm just kind of making it connect and trying to understand that PMI or as a like a project management body, how they're like looking at it as a case study or like as a guide rail they are going to set up for something like because project management again can go very bad if AI takes over fully.
Yeah,
So
good question. Go ahead.
I think this goes back to you're essentially like when you think of the sponsorship of the project with these large language models, with literally understanding your organizational data points, right? Depending on where you are from a compliance perspective, that has to be established in the very beginning, right? What PII data is available, what data is not going to be available, what is going to be within your space and what is not. I mean, these are things that have to be decided way in advance before you start extending your models. And I think that where we are from like a data privacy landscape is I think GDPR and all of the kind of things that fall in the data privacy space, if you think about it, it's also kind of marching at the same time. So I think within the next year, we're going to see a lot of synergies between the two.
Folks, on that note, thank you. This has been such a wonderful, robust, thoughtful, informative discussion. Appreciate all of you who have stayed on, contributing questions and just generally supporting the conversation. We will have some follow-up out of this, so look for your mailbox for some kind of key points and link to the recording. And we hope to see you at some of our future events.